Well, good morning. Got my clock going. Good morning, Commissioners, ladies and gentlemen. First, I appreciate the opportunity. You've heard that from many of the department heads saying the same thing. Thank you for the opportunity to let us come up here and talk to you about our budgets. You know, what is working, what we need, and what our challenges are. I do understand that I'm a bigger obstacle, other than the break, I'm a bigger obstacle between you and lunchtime. So I will keep mine at around 20 minutes. And if I do this right, I'll have no questions and we'll be good to go and on our way to Charlie's. So I'm Tim Fitzgerald. I'm your Spokane County Clerk. And for the next 20 minutes, I just want to talk to you about what our duties and responsibilities are, how I support the other legal agencies inside the courthouse and outside the courthouse and the public, and then what are some of my challenges, and then what am I doing to address our budget issues. So our mission statement, being a former Marine, this is way too long, and we'll pare it down to 2 sentences as it should be. But the bottom line is our job is to serve the public and to serve the legal community with our administrative duties and our financial duties. The key point I want you to take away from this is that I'm a statutory office. So I have rules and laws written in law in the RCWs on what it is that I'm supposed to be doing. The second key point I want you to take away from this brief is that I directly support the Superior Court in the performance of their duties, the juvenile court, the prosecutor, the public defender, the counsel for defense, pretrial services, and detention services. So I directly support them in what they need to do in the performance of their duties. All right, my office is pretty simple. I have 6 separate but integrated departments, much like Vicki Dalton at the auditor. These are separate departments, but they do coordinate with each other, but they have different performance, different functions, different missions to handle. We do all 8 case types. And I think that's critical to know. So we do the civil cases, the criminal cases, family law cases, all the way down to the juvenile court. In the next couple of slides, I'll explain what each of these individual departments do in detail. I'll kind of give you some background of what we do. Okay, so our services. Statutory duties. I have 10 statutory duties that directly impact the other agencies. Think of an hourglass. At the top of the hourglass, you have the public, the attorneys, and all our legal agencies, like the prosecutor, public defender, counsel for defense. That skinny part in the middle, that's me. The bottom of the hourglass are your courts, juvenile court, superior court, district court, mainly superior court and juvenile court. Everything goes through the clerk's office, into the courts. You get the rulings, judgments, decisions. Flip the hourglass over, goes back down through the clerk's office, back to the public, back to the attorneys. So what's the challenge? I'm the bottleneck. When I'm functioning properly and I'm moving at the proper pace, everybody else is doing fine. When I slow down, I get behind, I cause everybody else to get behind. I cause a pretty significant domino effect in the criminal justice system. And it's unfair to the other agencies, but I can slow them down in the performance of their duties. The other thing about that is that I'm not graded, but the courts are. You have judicial timelines when things must be handled and submitted, and people have a chance to respond. You have times when people have to appear in court. So they all have timelines that they are graded on. I am not. So I can cause them a lot of heartburn when I'm not keeping up with my performance or my duties. Okay, so service descriptions. The archive section is a separate section. What the archives mainly does is they store our exhibits and our files. We have tens of thousands of exhibits currently stored right now. By law, we have to maintain certain exhibits for a certain period of time. Then we can destroy exhibits with court permission, or we have to keep them in perpetuity sometimes. We had 238,463 legal files when I took over. We were paying a lot of money outside storage for that. By working with the court and getting destruction orders submitted and getting these copies electronically copied on these files, I can say right now we're down to 169,575 legal files on hand. And we'll continue destroying files with court authorization as we digitally copy them and keep moving down the road, which is great for us because it reduces all our storage requirements. But Archives does that, and they have records all the way back to 1878. Process clerks, for you mechanically inclined folks, think of a power engine, a turbine engine. They are the power. They handle all the paperwork coming through. They put it onto our document management system, and then they have to link it, enter it, and slide it over to the state case management system, SCOMAS. 8,000 sheets of paper they do a day. And IT, Becky's here, she was here, Becky's still here, she's my witness. They actually track that for us. So we know for a fact, electronically, there's 8,000 sheets of paper being handled per day, and probably some bunch of other sheets that we don't even track or keep track of with fax machines or something else. So all this documentation is coming through, and I'll talk more about the modernization efforts down the road. But right now you can see it's manpower intensive and what the process clerks do. Court clerk, statutory duty. You got to have a court clerk in the courtroom. Our Superior Court and Juvenile Court moves at 100 miles an hour. They're incredibly busy. We start at 8:30 in the morning. We go all the way till 6 o'clock in the evening. We run, on average, 18 dockets a day. So a challenge here is that you have 19 judicial officers and you have 20 clerks. So if anybody's sick, on vacation, or not available, you can see there's not much wiggle room or flexibility for both sides. We have very little room to keep the pace going. So it's a constant, constant stream of, again, about 100 miles an hour doing things. All right, the customer service. They are the face of the clerk's office. They handle all your customers coming in and out of the clerk's office. Attorneys come in, the attorneys start with the clerk's office, get all their files, take them down to courtrooms. Decisions are rendered, motions are presented, all that stuff is brought back to the clerk's office to be documented, filed, stamped. The stamp is what sets the timeline, so that's a critical issue. The customer service handles 11,200 people. So I brought with me today, Gary Berg, my chief deputy, but I also brought Leslie Taylor, who's a customer service manager. She also dual hats as the executive assistant. We'll talk more about how we are flatlining the staff a little bit for economic purposes. But 11,200 people is what they handle a day, and they pass all the records out to attorneys that show up. I also work the front counter. I can walk down and get a file as easy as anybody else can. So that's how we maintain the pace of what's going on. Finance department, separate department, they handle all the financial transactions. So all the money that comes in for filing fees, for court ruling and assessments, for orders, for anything done along those lines, finance handles. Again, they handle $900,000 a month in legal financial transactions and in financial transactions for filing fees that are brought in. The bottom bullet right there says collect legal financial obligations. That was my supplemental request. I have briefed two of the commissioners on this one. I'll have to get with Commissioner Cooney on this later on. But that was a supplemental brief. We've already had this brief, so I won't go through it again today, but we've had that discussion on where we are with the legal financial obligation program. Juvenile. So think of juvenile as just a smaller section of the big house. So in the big house, we handle Superior Court. Juvenile does the exact same thing that I have, and they do it at the juvenile court in support of Bonnie Bush and her team. So they have court clerks, processors, customer service, and then our archive shop will handle the records for them going in and out. So that gives you a feel for what the 6 different departments do. So on the functional chart right here, just a different approach. I just want to show you, you look down at that gray bullet right there where it says 30%, and that's the courtroom clerks. Go up to the green segment, that's 11%. That's the finance office. So 41% right there, right off the bat, is in direct support of the other agencies. So that's my tie-in, is that I directly support the other agencies. So 41% of everything I do functionally, at a minimum, is tied directly to Superior Court, Juvenile Court, the prosecutor, the public defenders, the attorneys, pretrial services, detention services. So everything I do impacts them directly. So I have to keep that in mind, that I have an impact on their offices as they're trying to perform their duties. On the financial information here, the big takeaway on this one here is I just want you to realize that I am not a revenue-producing office. All right, so I always come in the red most of the time, and the primary reason behind that is because I do direct services. So I directly support other offices. When we do bring in filing fees, about $1.6 million, I'll show you that here in a second on a pie chart, a lot of that comes in but is divvied up. So I'll give you 2 examples. If you're doing a civil filing fee at $240, they pay a filing fee to the clerk's office, $240. That fee is divided up in 7 different categories. Part of it goes to a law library. Part of it goes to the state. Part of it goes to our judicial stabilization fund. It doesn't stay in the county, it doesn't stay in the county general fund. It's farmed out and distributed to different accounts per RCW that the treasurer has to follow. So that's one of the reasons why I go, wow, all this money's coming in, but where's it going? By law, it goes out to different agencies. DNA, we do the DNA. That money, that $100 that the court rules on, comes into the clerk's office, but then 20% goes to state and 80% goes to the DNA office. We get nothing out of that. So that's just an example of why you see a fair amount of revenue coming in, but it doesn't stay in the county, and that's the reason why. So on the revenue, about $1.4, $1.5 million come in on filing fees, copies, documents like that. Additionally, we had the $473,000 I had briefed you on the supplemental fund that come in on legal financial obligations. The other funds you see there, the point I'm just making here is that we do get other revenue from other funds. So the clerk's office is handled by all these funds right here. So I have the Becca fund, I have a 103 fund, I have a civil commitment fund, I have the 130 fund. So I have separate funds that we're managing money out of. But I know the focus today is the general fund. All right, on the expenditures, what I'm looking at on expenditures, if you look at this very carefully, you can see clearly what makes this so unique is that 96% of all my expenditures, 96% are salary and benefits, period. 4% is M&O, and that is it. I can't cut programs because that will impact the other departments. I can't say, okay, I'm not doing civil commitment anymore because that directly impacts the court, and the court has a say in that. So, and as does the law have a say in that, and it impacts Larry and it'll impact Tom the same way. I have no equipment to cut. I don't have cars or anything like that. So all I have is just the people, and 96% is all of the people. And then the M&O is, we've scrunched it down as small as we can get it at just 4% right now. So that's where my expenditures sit at right now. Okay, so what's my proposal to you? That's what we're here to talk about. What can I do to make things better? Well, a couple of things. First of all, we talked about flattening the staff. So I'm going to flatten the staff out a little bit, not make it so designed like a pyramid. So I'll flatten it out some more. So one of the things we're going to do is we're going to cut the chief deputy position. I know that that's heresy among most people, but my chief deputy has performed magnificently in the county for 44 years, and he's finally going to retire. And it breaks our heart that Gary's going to retire, but he's ready to go and move on to the next phase of his life. So with the chief deputy position being vacated, I'm going to restructure it into an office manager position. And the reason I'm going to restructure it into an office manager position, because that's a 2/3 pay cut, and only 1/3 will be required to maintain the officer manager position. So use a little bit of creativity, use a little bit of flat staff. In addition, by putting an officer manager in that position, they'll pick up everything that Gary does. In addition, I can assign certain functions from my customer service dual-hatted executive assistant, Leslie, take some of her functions off her back and move it over to the office manager. And then make a shuffle with some of the supervisors, open the executive assistant customer service position up, bring in a new person to handle that position, and they can do it at a much lower salary because the responsibilities have been moved over to the office manager. So it's a 2-for-1, and kind of looking at some cuts. We also cut a office assistant 3, which is customer service. That would have been a killer, but again, using modernization, we automated our phones. We've been working with IT. Again, IT has been a huge help for me. Automating our phones. So we got our phones. We tracked for about 5 months what were the type of calls we were getting, what people were asking questions for. And we got a pretty good feel of how to automate the phones and get people, customer service is important. That's what the county is here for. We're a county of services. And so to get the people to go where they have to go to get their questions answered, therefore, I can take that customer service receptionist off the phone, put them on the counter, the position I just cut, then go on the counter and fill that position back up. And now the phones are automated, and I don't need somebody sitting there on the phones 8 hours a day. So the modernization will really help us out get into where we got to go. We'll cut our travel budget by $4,000. I actively participate in the Clerks Association. I'm the co-chair of the legislative group. I'm also on the state level Minority and Justice LFO Commission with Justice Yu. So I'll have other agencies pay for our travel as we're doing things and get the county out of that. Okay, so we did some hiring freezes. We froze hiring the backfill for the OA3. So when the OA3 resigned, position was vacant, we left it vacant, and of course we're going to end up cutting the position in 2018, January. But since August, it's remained vacant. So that's money, and I know that Ms. Wallace briefed you a little bit on the fact that some of the departments are trying to be creative and take money that we saved this year and roll it over into next year as part of our cuts to help us get to where we got to go. So that's some of the things we're doing on a creative manner. So that position will stay vacant. The court clerk, so I cut that position as part of our discussions to get me to where I have to be at. And for 2 months, we did that, and we tracked what it did to the courts, the prosecutor's office, counsel for defense, the public defenders, and it was a nightmare. And as Commissioner French remembers, back in December of 2016, I came in before the board and said, I need some help. We're having a hard time keeping up with the court and everybody with the workload. I need an extra clerk. I need clerk number 20, so I can have 20 clerks versus 19 judicial officers against 18 dockets. 'cause I need some flexibility. And the board heard the argument, the board concurred, and the board gave me the extra position of the clerk. So coming back into you now and saying, okay, I guess we'll cut that position, I don't think is a good idea. And for 2 months, we gave it a run, and it didn't work because we left the court hanging a couple of times. Because the court will get special sets. They'll get pop-up requirements. They have to go outside the county, and they have to bring down a visiting judge. We run 2 civil commitment hearings a day. They'll go out and do 2 civil commitment hearings almost every day. So when that starts to happen, we get behind. And then I got to have a clerk to fill that. So what I was doing was pulling a processor out to go into the courtroom because processors are trained as clerks. So now the processor's in there in the courtroom, and what's the processor not doing? They're not processing the paper. And therefore, the legal documents are not up to date, causing more distractions and disruption in the system. So I pulled the clerk back out. In my workbook, you'll read it in the workbook where we had the clerk removed, but we put it back in again. That was the reason why. It just didn't work. And I've already talked about how to adjust the hiring of the executive assistant and customer service on that reset there. We also have some folks that will be taking some FMLA leave. Again, trying to be a little bit creative. They'll be out of the office. There'll be no pay due situations. So what I'm doing here is just holding money that's in the payroll right now. We're not going to spend it, and then we'll roll over into next year as appropriate, and then to be used as it needs to be in the general fund. Okay, so use that line right in the middle there. It goes across. Those are all the reductions that we have made, and that got us to where we need to be at. But now we have some additions. All right, so one of those additions is 1/3 of the reduction of the chief deputy is to rehire an office manager. So that 1/3 will go away. In the Beckett process, so working with Bonnie Bush and working with Ashley Cowan, the courts and the clerk's office are always working together to make things better. We have a lot of things going on in our juvenile court. We get pretty busy down there. We have a lot of responsibilities, and the state pays for a fair amount of that stuff, the Beckett Fund being one of them. We saw a situation where duties probably belonged to the court and not to the clerk, but the clerk was getting paid to do them. We shifted those duties over to the court, but then the court will receive the Beckett funding because the court is now doing those duties, and the clerk will lose the Beckett funding, which means I will need $25,000 out of the general fund to compensate that gap. Well, a big chunk of that money is already in the general fund. Probably 75% of it's already in the fund because I was paying the court to do that mission. The only slight difference is some of the court salary rates are slightly higher than the clerk salary rates. So it won't be a one-for-one swap. There might be a little bit of money to have to come out and support the clerk's office on that because my folks don't quite make as much as the court does in certain positions. So, and then we had the last bullet there, extra help. That's a possibility. It may not be. So you can take that bottom line and add another 11,000 to it, and that'll put me at 123,000 in reductions that we can make. And the key to that, I guess, is that by making those reductions, I can still do my job without impacting the other departments, which is a main stake in the argument for me. I'm very proud of my people. They've worked very hard to make these adjustments. The modernization has not been easy for them. No one likes change, but you got to modernize the offices to keep up. So I'll give you some examples of what we've done to date to reduce our budget and to do some of the modernization. Okay, so we implemented debit and credit cards. Customers, the public is very happy about that. And it's at no charge to the county. So we can do debit and credit card transactions online. We can do it at the courthouse, and the county doesn't have to pay for it. The customers will pay for it like they do an ATM card or anything else. Like other departments, we implemented TimeSoft. And TimeSoft is great because people can do their check-in, check-out, their vacation, their sick days on a computer at their desk. As Vicki Dalton mentioned yesterday, it reduces people traveling back and forth. I got offices in 3 different locations on campus. Across the street, I got them in juvenile court, and I got them in the big house. So it reduces people walking up there to drop a piece of paper off in an inbox to put in their vacation time. They can do it at their computer, and they can get back to work. And that saves us a lot of time and a lot of money by implementing the TimeSoft. We did that Dropbox, that electronic stamp in the hallway, so your attorneys can now do after-hours filing and get their work done and stay within the timelines that the court is directed to stay in, and I don't need to open my doors past 4 to pay overtime to bring in filings. They can do it on an electronic stamp and then drop it in Dropbox. Stamp sets the timeline. We're good to go for that day. Next morning I pick it up, and the processors will process it. So there's no overtime payments there. We thought that was a big deal. Same thing with the flex time. Allow employees to come in early in the morning and work to a certain point, leave, have another group come, like a shift, like you work a warehouse shift. And that enables the clerk's office to be open all through lunch, enabling all the filings and stuff to get done so we don't backlog the court. So the court doesn't have to wait till 1 or 2 o'clock to get the cases running, because I can get the paperwork ready to go at lunchtime. So we open the doors up at lunch this year, and we can do that with the flex time. And then the biggest one, thank you, Becky, is barcoding. Barcoding was used. We spent a year working on it, probably over a year, about a year and a half, coding the program, developing the program, buying the equipment, saving the money to buy the equipment, and getting double screens for processors, the big scanning machines so the work can go faster, and then getting the barcode machines in place. This is saving us 30, 40 seconds per person as they're doing a single document. So if I had to put a court processor in the courtroom, fine. The other processors can keep up with that 8,000 sheets of paper a day because everything's a lot faster now. Even more important, next year, Ms. Callan and I will be in front of you again next year talking to you about Odyssey, because Odyssey's coming. So we'll be going to Odyssey, which is a significant fundamental change to how we do business in the courthouse. It'll be a brand new case management system, and we have to have it online by November of next year. So we'll be doing that. So just as a heads up, the barcode scanning feeds into Odyssey. So Odyssey does barcode scanning. So we already have that process, which is a big chunk of it, already in place. And the last thing we're doing is we're getting the courtroom minutes computerized electronically, because that's also part of Odyssey. So we're doing it, we're training them now, and Becky's team has built the program for us. So we'll get into the courtrooms and start doing everything electronically on the minutes, and no more of the handwritten paper minutes. So we'll get that done. So those are the things that we have done in the modernization category. We will continue to modernize. You've heard the other electeds and department heads say the same thing. We got to modernize. We need to go paperless, and that will be our goal next year, to eventually get to paperless. So on that note, I thank you again for the opportunity to talk in front of you. Hopefully I've answered your questions. A special thank you to Ms. Wallace and her budget team, and a special shout out to Downs, who explained a bunch of things to me I didn't know, so now I know. So now I'm more dangerous. And I am standing by for your questions.
Questions for Mr. Fitzgerald? Okay.
Okay, so question on and this might be with Tanya too, is rolling over some of those funds, the savings that you have this year into next year. Is that one of the areas that you're letting that's happening?
Commissioner CUNY, that is something that you can decide specifically for the clerk. They have asked for that.
Okay.
But that is also part of the reason why we asked for a much larger, or gave the suggestion of a much larger incentive program that would allow departments overall that if they have created savings at the end of the year, and we recognize those, give them some use of those. You're going to hear, and you've already heard for several departments where they've cut travel, they have cut into M&O, they're holding back and deferring equipment. Those turnback dollars could really help not just the clerk's office fulfill their obligations, but many departments. And like I said, when you hear travel cuts or you hear other minor cuts like that, they're minor on paper and they're minor in dollar value, but they can have a prolonged impact on the overall service and the capabilities of the staff. So that's why we did present that suggestion to you that would be beneficial across to all the departments.
Right. Okay. Thank you. Otherwise, great job. I learned a lot.
Yeah, nice job, and keep it up. Great work.
Thank you.
And so when's your last day? November 30th. Of which year? Oh, okay. Well, thanks for all your service to the county. Thank you. Okay, Ms. Wallace.
Listeners, that is all that we have scheduled for you this morning. We did finish up a little early. So we were scheduled for lunch between 11:30 and 12:30. So I just want to confirm we will begin. This will be a break